All right, the opposition against a data center at Fisk University is growing louder today. Several community leaders, students, and alumni gathered outside of the school expressing their concerns about that project.
WSMV's Amber Jayanth has more of their message tonight.
It's messaging from the university.
Several Friskites are pushing back on a proposal to build a data center on Fisk University's campus. The project, called the Quantum Leap and Innovation Center, would include a 70,000 square foot technology center and a 30,000 square foot academic center. The university says this project would better serve students by enhancing the university's infrastructure and technology, but some fear it would do more harm than good.
This project will have much more cost in terms of the public health cost, in terms of the cost to the well-being and longevity of our students.
There are several environmental concerns due to data centers' excessive use of water and electricity, and they also say the centers would disrupt learning with the noise pollution, which could eventually have an impact on enrollment.
Just imagine what that would do to students who want to pull all-nighters, students who are maybe trying to get, rest before an exam or before a really important class in the morning. So I think just noise pollution alone would be very disruptive.
Representative Jones says his requests to meet with administrators at Fisk were denied, and a class he was teaching about the dangers of AI on campus was canceled after a week. He says their lack of communication and transparency about the project speaks the loudest.
There's a pattern of targeting communities of least resistance. And so if this was so good, let's build this in Belmead. Let's build this in Green Hills.
On Tuesday, Metro Council passed their first reading on a moratorium to build more data centers. And also tomorrow, there will be a public forum where people can come out and express their concerns. That's happening at 4 o'clock at the Howard office building. In Nashville, Amber Jayanth, WSMV4.